Before America was a nation, it was a pressure cooker. 13 colonies stretched along a distant continent, tied to an empire that ruled from across the ocean, demanding loyalty, money, and obedience, while offering little voice in return. What followed wasn't a clean march toward freedom, but a slow build of anger, fear, and ambition. Ordinary people questioning extraordinary power. From crowded taverns to ink-stained pamphlets, ideas turned dangerous, words turned revolutionary, and dissatisfaction turned into defiance. This is not a story of instant liberty or perfect heroes. This is the story of how a nation was born in resistance, contradiction, and unfinished promises that would shape its future forever. Today in this video, discuss about America's history is way messier than you think. Chapter 2: Freedom, but only for some. Fast forward to the 1700s and everything feels like it's about to pop off. The American colonies are straight up fed up, tired of Britain reaching across the ocean with its hand out, taxing anything that breathes, moves, or exists on paper. Tea, stamps, sugar, trade, basically life itself. It felt like the Crown was running a never-ending subscription service nobody signed up for, and definitely couldn't cancel. Every new tax hit like a reminder that the colonies were expected to pay up without having any real Sino voice. No vote. Just vibes and bills stacking higher every year. That frustration didn't stay small. Merchants were bleeding profits, workers felt squeezed, farmers felt ignored, and people started realizing this wasn't just bad policy, it was disrespect. Britain wanted loyalty without responsibility, obedience without representation. Taverns turned into political forums, pamphlets spread like wildfire, and casual complaints about money slowly morphed into dangerous questions about power, rights, and who actually got to decide how people lived. This wasn't some clean, heroic moment. It was loud, messy, paranoid, and scary. Because rebellion sounds cool in history books, but in real time it feels like gambling your entire future. So when the colonies finally said, "Nah, we're done," it wasn't just about tea dumped into a harbor. It was about dignity, control, and the belief that being ruled from thousands of miles away by people who didn't know the land or the people was straight up bogus. Independence wasn't born from a single protest. It exploded out of years of pressure, anger, and the growing feeling that staying loyal meant staying powerless. Then comes 1776, the mic drop year. The colonies put their frustration into words and dropped the Declaration of Independence like a revolutionary diss track, aimed straight at the British Empire. The language was bold, poetic, and dangerous, especially that now iconic line, "All men are created equal." On paper, it sounded like a total reset. No kings, no divine right nonsense, just people born with rights no government was allowed to mess with. That idea alone was wild for its time. And yeah, it deserves credit for cracking open a door that had been locked for centuries. But here's where things get uncomfortable fast. While those words were being written and celebrated, slavery was still legal. Women were completely shut out of politics, and Native Americans weren't even part of the equation. The lines sounded universal, but the reality was selective. Freedom was being defined, but only for a specific group. Mostly white, mostly male, mostly everyone else was expected to wait, stay quiet, or disappear. And that gap between words and reality is where America's Mazzini's really shows. Now, let's talk about the Founding Fathers, because history loves turning them into marble statues instead of complicated humans. These dudes were smart, strategic, and bold, breaking away from monarchy and imagining a republic when that idea still felt risky as hell. But many of them owned enslaved people and benefited directly from forced labor. Thomas Jefferson could write about liberty while holding human beings in chains, and somehow that contradiction didn't stop the revolution. That's not a side note, that's a core feature of the system being built. By the time independence was secured, America was born with a glow-up and a flaw at the same time. Nation preaching freedom while practicing exclusion. The revolution proved people could overthrow authority and rewrite the rules, and that alone changed the world. But inside the new country, freedom stayed uneven, powerful for some, unreachable for others. The promise was real enough to chase, but incomplete enough to cause constant tension. And that's the uncomfortable truth at the heart of America's origin. Story freedom wasn't fake, it was just rationed. That tension didn't disappear once the flag went up and Britain dipped out. If anything, it got louder. The new nation had to figure out what freedom actually meant in practice, and that's where things got awkward fast. Writing ideals is easy. Living up to them is hard. Laws started getting written. Governments formed. And suddenly the same people who hated being controlled had to decide how much control they were comfortable using on others. Spoiler alert, not everyone agreed, and those disagreements were about to shape everything. The Constitution came next. Another big swing at defining freedom, power, and limits. It tried to balance chaos and control, liberty and order. But it also locked in compromises that kicked hard problems down the road. Slavery wasn't solved, it was delayed. Rights weren't guaranteed equally. They were negotiated. The system worked well enough to keep the country together, but only by pretending certain injustices could be dealt with later, a word that would haunt American history for generations. Meanwhile, everyday life didn't suddenly feel revolutionary for most people. Farmers still struggled, workers still hustled, and power stayed concentrated in the hands of elites who looked suspiciously similar to the old rulers, just with different accents. The king was gone, but hierarchy wasn't. America had escaped one form of control, but it hadn't figured out how to stop creating new ones, and that contradiction kept simmering under the surface. For the people left out, the revolution raised dangerous hope. Enslaved Africans heard talk of liberty and wondered when it would stop being theoretical. Women saw proof they could run households, farms, and businesses, and questioned why politics was off. Native nations watched a country born from rebellion expand, the same way empires always had Bayatakeen land. The revolution didn't silence these questions. It planted them, and they weren't going anywhere. So America didn't start as a finished product, it started as an argument, an ongoing fight between ideals and reality, freedom and fear, promise and power. Every generation after inherited that mess and had to decide whether to ignore it, benefit from it, or challenge it. That's why American history never feels settled, never feels clean, because from day one, the country was built on a bold idea that had never fully delivered on end. That unfinished business is still part of the story today. America didn't just inherit freedom, it inherited a contradiction, a promise powerful enough to inspire the world, and a flaw deep enough to haunt it forever. This is International Behaviour, where history is examined, not glorified. Like, subscribe, and stay curious. Chapter 3 exposes America's original sin slavery, a system that shaped freedom, wealth, and power from the very beginning. Uploading soon.